This is High School Not So Much a Musical, a podcast that takes you on a ride through the peaks and valleys of a high school journey. Here are your presenters, Nitin Jaladanki and Ayush Agarwal.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of High School Not So Much a Musical. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mr. Stan Efferding, who has world record titles in both bodybuilding and powerlifting, has started up dozens of businesses, and has experience in both the fitness industry, business, and the health and fitness. So Mr. Stan Efferding, if you could give an introduction about yourself, who you are, what you've done over the years, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. I played soccer and I wrestled in high school, and I had a soccer scholarship, but I was only weighed about 135 pounds as a 18-year-old freshman in college. So my coach told me to go lift weights, and I spent a few months lifting weights that summer, and I never came back. I told coach I was done. I wasn't going to play soccer. Believe it or not, my skinny little self, a whopping 135, 140, I determined I was going to be a professional bodybuilder. That was my dream. That was my goal. Highly unlikely, of course, at that size, at that time, at almost 6 feet tall. At the time, you had to be about 250 pounds on stage in order to compete again in bodybuilding, because they didn't have, heavyweight was everything over 198. And at my height, I certainly had to be a heavyweight. So I kept going to school, and I started studying. I got a degree in psychology, and then I enrolled in their exercise science program, got a science degree, anatomy, phys, biology, kinese, those kinds of things. And I was lifting all through this time. I did a bodybuilding show in 1988 after about two and a half years of lifting, and I weighed 158 pounds on stage. And so I was still quite thin, but my dream was still the same. I was reading Muscle and Fitness magazine every week and learning everything I could and studying exercise science. I eventually became a high school soccer coach. And then as I kept getting bigger and stronger and competing more and more throughout the years, and ultimately won the Mr. Oregon at a whopping 200 pounds on my journey, I started coaching University of Oregon football and track athletes. I was living there in Eugene, Oregon. That's Tracktown, USA. So, of course, I was working with some of the best track athletes in the world. And the University of Oregon football team was actually a Rose Bowl. Went to the Rose Bowl in 1995, and I was working with a lot of those players. So I kind of, I worked at gyms. I was a personal trainer. Everything I could to stay involved in that industry. It was hard to make a living at it, though. So I had to work a number of different jobs. But ultimately, I did become an IFBB pro bodybuilder and a world record power lifter, just out of sheer determination and desire, and took many, many, many years. That's kind of my history of how I got involved in that sport.
Okay, perfect. So I can move us on to our next question. Thank you for the introduction. So you reached like the pinnacle of fitness of the fitness industry in terms of establishing multiple businesses. So could you talk a little bit about each of the entrepreneurial processes by which you went by to create them? And then we can also get later to the business that you're able to pitch on Shark Tank.
Yeah, it started as a young age. I had a paper route when I was 8. I worked at a deli counting cans. My mom was making sandwiches when I was 10 years old. And I got a job at 7-Eleven when I was 12 years old. Dusting shelves and stocking the cooler and counting cans, that kind of thing. And I worked there for 4 years and picked up, periodic jobs here and there. Worked at a pizza place, flipping pizzas. And then when I went to college, I did construction to help make money, put myself through college. And I managed apartment complexes, small apartments. I was a resident assistant in the dorms, and then I managed some small apartment places for free rent, basically. And I would paint and clean and collect rents in order to have free housing. And I worked as a personal trainer as well. I worked at a gym, trying to help people, teach people to lift and that kind of thing. After I graduated, I was still personal training, and I was selling supplements. I was packing a bunch of supplements into a van and driving up and down the I-5 corridor there in the Northwest, in Oregon and Washington, going from gym to gym and making shakes and trying to sell people protein powders and the like. And I took a job at an apartment community, and I was just a maintenance man. It was a large apartment community. And I just worked hard there for many years, and I became assistant manager and eventually manager. And eventually we developed 200 more units. It's a $15 million expansion on the project. And I was running a 600 unit apartment community with 40 employees. And so I guess the nature of all that is just to say that, and then I got hired by another apartment community, which was a real estate investment trust that owned, over $1 billion in properties nationwide. And I ran that for them. Had 60 employees and over 1,200 units under my supervision. And then I took a job as a vice president of a telecommunications company. And I guess the point of all that is just to say that before I ever started a business, I was 35 years old and I had significant experience, both in multifamily real estate, customer service, and telecommunications. And that's what my first two businesses were. When I was 35 years old, I opened up a telecommunications company just out of my apartment. And I also sold my home and cashed in my 401k. And I invested with a partner to buy a small apartment community. It was about 46 units. And I had some sweat equity. I didn't have enough cash really to get an equal position in that thing. So I had to run it. I had to live in it and run it. And so I ran my telephones company out of that apartment, a little 3-bedroom apartment that I lived in. And the telephone company was a startup. So I was knocking on doors and getting people to sign up for phone service. And, just fast forwarding, we were able to improve that apartment community and increase the rents and sell it and start buying other apartment communities. In the telecommunications company, I was able to eventually run commercials. And within a couple of years, I had 100 employees in 20 states, servicing over 100,000 telephone lines and generating 25 million a year in revenue. So I guess the point of that whole thing is to say that I only started businesses that I had experience in for the most part, and that I had personal control over, that I was operating myself. I still have that mindset. It's that if you aren't managing your asset and you don't have significant knowledge of the business, then I think you're much less likely to succeed. I eventually started an engineering firm after the real estate market collapsed. I had owned hundreds of apartment units and had built dozens of single-family homes, subdivisions, and commercial real estate. And the market collapsed in 2008, and we lost $4 trillion in value nationwide. And I personally lost 20 million in assets overnight. And so it was a bit of a struggle. So I've been wealthy and been poor and rebuilt it again. Now I've built since 3 more multi-million-dollar companies, the engineering firm. I built up the cooler, which we'll talk about with the Sharktank, and then the vertical diet. Now I have a nationwide meal prep company, and I do seminars and sell ebooks online and do online training and stuff like that. So just kept hammering away, doing things that I've always been familiar with and good at, and I've been real successful as a result.
Yeah, the fact that you were able to lift weights and still focus on bodybuilding while you did and while you owned all these different companies and businesses is kind of crazy, because especially at the start of this, you mentioned that when you were in your teenage years, you worked at grocery stores and 7-Eleven, and that's pretty young to be working in stores. And you mentioned you were playing soccer, and then you focused on weightlifting and bodybuilding. And that's pretty stressful. And especially for us high schoolers nowadays, especially because Ayush, Nitin, and I, we go to a private school that's mainly STEM focused. We're focused a lot on our AP scores, standardized testing. So why do you think it's important for teenagers to live a healthy lifestyle? What are the benefits that will make it worthwhile to spend a few hours each week exercising and eating right?
You can take a deep dive into this in my video, my Rhinos rant called Stress for Success, where I talked about how certain times in my life, I let stress overwhelm me and I became less productive. And the foundational principles of that video and as for, how I was able to be successful is I just was disciplined with, first and foremost, sleep. Sleep improves retention when you're studying. It's not what you read that day, it's what you're able to retain the next day, and getting adequate sleep, obviously REM sleep in particular, which is a stage of sleep that helps create those memories and connections. Those sleep stages, REM and stage 4 sleep, get longer and longer the longer you sleep. And so it's about a 90-minute clock. They call sleep stages. Each stage is about 90 minutes. And each subsequent stage throughout the night has a longer REM and stage 4 restorative sleep. And so getting 7+ hours, getting into your fourth stage, ideally, would give you the optimal benefit for studying and retention of that information. So sleep became, a foundational principle. Obviously for energy was also very important. Exercise is another one that improves cognition and relieves stress. And I would do that. I would recommend to do that, as I have for the last decade or more, periodically throughout the day, instead of one bout at the end of the day. Has a lot to do. It helps both with, after what they call postprandial glycemia, after a meal, how high your blood sugars elevate and how long they stay elevated. And if you eat and then go take a 10 or 15 minute walk, you substantially reduce that postprandial glycemia, which helps you with more energy, better health, better digestion, just kind of restarts the clock. You can't really, a lot of research has been done in psychology about studying and retention of information. And you're, going past, say, an hour, hour and a half tops, you kind of tapped out your resources in terms of your ability to keep, studying and retaining adequate information from that session. So you're kind of better off taking small breaks about every 45 minutes or so and getting up and moving around and then revisiting that topic or a different topic. And I used to do that in college. I had 4 classes. I would just have to assign 1 hour to each class, because if I sat there and tried to obtain all the information I could, I would take too long and it wouldn't be very effective. And so I would set smaller goals. I would spend 45 minutes studying a particular topic, and then a 15-minute break. I would come back and spend 45 minutes studying a different class, a different topic. And I would continue to do that throughout college. I also packed my meals, which was a huge relief for me, so I could have the food that I wanted on the time frame that I wanted it, as opposed to getting voraciously hungry and then going and cramming down a bunch of garbage. And maintaining a sensible body weight is pretty important in terms of insulin sensitivity and hormones and sleep. So really, that's the foundation of it. Is I was just organized, and I just made sure, and it didn't take a huge investment to take a few 10-minute walks a day and to organize my meals and to make sure that I prioritized sleep rather than trying to pull all-nighters. And so that's kind of the way that I managed myself through working hard to develop my businesses as well. I maintained that foundation of regular exercise, a healthy diet, and a good sleep behavior, good sleep patterns.
Yeah. So you mentioned how you would organize your food like in the morning before you went to school, stuff like that. And a lot of like teenagers, they're like eating like shit the entire day. They'll be up to like 2 a.m. like just stuffing garbage down their throat, and then they'll be waking up at like 6 a.m. because they have to go to school. And like you said, you organize your own meals. So do you think it's beneficial for teenagers to like start maybe cooking a little bit so that they know what they're putting into their meals, instead of like going to like McDonald's and getting a Big Mac and they don't even know like if that's even like real meat? So do you think like it's beneficial for them to start cooking?
Here's the big thing. It saves time, it saves money, obviously. But in terms of health, it's hard to find sufficient quality protein sources when you go to fast food. Like you mentioned, burgers at McDonald's, that's a 75-25 beef. It's equivalent to a hot dog, really, in terms of its fatty content and its saturated fat content. It's just not optimal for health and performance. So I like to keep about 30% of my calories as protein. I lead with protein. I try and get a gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's hard to do doing fast food or, obviously from any vending machine or anything like that. So here's the trick that I did, and this kind of came from bodybuilding at a young age in college, is that just about everybody in that industry, the bodybuilding, figure, physique, bikini, wellness, whatever you want to call it, they meal prep. They're always walking around with plastic containers with their food in it, their 6-pack bag. The problem is that the food in those containers gets cold and gets old and tastes like shit. So I eventually, later in my career, I came across an idea to start using one of those double insulated thermos. So I could put a hot meal in it and it would stay hot for 10 hours. Now I travel all over the world. I've done over 200 seminars in 12 countries in all 50 states. And sometimes I'll fly internationally for multiple days or a week at a time. And when I'm on planes, when I leave the house to go to the airport, I have enough meals packed in thermos, hot meals, to get me to my destination. And then I put some, I mentioned I have a meal prep company, so I'll put some of my frozen meal prep food, which you could make at home yourself and freeze the night before, into my carry-on luggage. And then when I get to my destination, I stay at a hotel that has a microwave, and I can cook my own meals while I'm there working and use the same thermos, so that when I leave my hotel room in the morning, I have sufficient meals to get me through until I get back in the evening. And that might be, say, 2 or 3 thermos, depending on, the individual's, their meal frequency and the amount of calories they need. But that little 24-ounce thermos on Amazon costs $20. And I got to tell you, it's been life-changing. I don't make any money saying that, but I'm able to maintain a very healthy diet and never have to eat fast food. I never have to eat airplane food or airport food or room service, at hotels. I eat my food, which is generally higher protein, has usually a 2-to-1 protein to fat ratio, because I like to keep fats under control. So it feels good on me, and I have great energy. And so I would encourage, and I have a video called, I think it's prepping food for traveling or something, which would equally apply to school. And, you just wake up in the morning, and while I'm making breakfast, I'm just making 3 times as much food as I would eat for breakfast. And the other 2 go in my thermos, and, I pop them into my bag, and you just put them in your book bag, and you're on the road. You don't have to worry about anything until 8 o'clock at night when you get back for dinner. And I have to say this on this topic, and just in terms of learning, sometimes people don't understand that there is a science to learning. We always implemented, when I was teaching in school, the Feynman technique. Some of you may have heard of that, Feynman, I believe, the Feynman technique. And it has kind of a 4-step process. You choose a topic you want to learn about, and you write down everything you know about it. And then you go about learning about it, whether it's watching videos or reading information on it. And you continue to write that down. And so you have everything that you know about a certain topic written on a piece of paper. And then you explain it to someone. You teach it to someone else. They say you don't really learn anything until you've taught it to someone else. But you teach it to someone as though they were a 12-year-old, not in a complicated fashion, but in a very simple fashion, so that they can understand it, and so that you understand it. And then you can go back and reflect and refine and simplify that message, and organize it and review it. But really, if you aren't able to write down everything that you know about a topic and teach it to someone else, you probably haven't learned it.
Yeah, and I think there's that famous Albert Einstein quote, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. And I think in the fitness industry right now, what I've seen with for example, Joel Seedman and people like those who try to overcomplicate everything. They make up terms like 90-degree, eccentric, isometrics, and they come up with all this stuff so they can, sell their programs or, get more likes on Instagram or whatever. But what I've liked about you is that you keep it simple, vertical diet, steak and rice diet, get your micronutrients in, and optimize your hormones and get enough sleep. And you also keep
and then I'm
simple
repeating myself over and over again, because I don't want to get down into the weeds and start arguing about stuff that's really inconsequential. It's not terribly meaningful. And so I've kind of run out of content. Once you watch my rants and one of my videos on YouTube, I think the Iceland video about the vertical diet has over 7 million views now. And at the very beginning, I said, we're just going to learn here how to sleep, eat, and train, period. That's it. And we're going to repeat that, rewind, play, repeat.
And that's pretty much all there is to it, right? That's really all you need to do. Could you talk a little bit more, about the content that you put out? Because as you said, you have so much content out there on YouTube, all for free. And hundreds of thousands of people still buy the vertical diet to get the full details. So is all this information you put out intentionally meant as a trailer to your, actual product of the vertical diet?
It is. I've just always focused on providing free but valuable information. Videos, podcasts, my rants, articles. I mentioned over 200 seminars, including the one in Iceland, which again has over 7 million views. I remember when I did that video in Iceland, and my wife, when I got home, my wife said, "You just put your entire vertical diet for free on the internet on a YouTube video." She goes, "Who's going to buy it?" And I told her, I said, "Just you wait." How many times, you guys know this, and everybody in the audience knows this, how many times have we watched a podcast or a video, and at the end of it, been like, shit, you couldn't remember all of the stuff. If it was a good video with valuable information, then you had to pull out a piece of paper and watch it again and write it down. And may be inclined to purchase a product that had even more detail, so you had an outline, you had something off of which to work. And the vertical diet provides that. Obviously, I provide menu plans and step-by-step guidance and grocery shopping lists and all that stuff, so that you have kind of a something that you can a workbook from which you can work from, that has a ton of information that you probably wouldn't retain. But I've also responded to over 100,000 DMs in the last 4 years. That's how we connected. You guys sent me a DM, I responded. And how many guys do that? And I find it to be valuable. I don't get paid anything for that, but I think I create relationships, and I think if I can give somebody enough good information, and then they will potentially get the vertical diet, which is over 200 pages with over 500 references to peer-reviewed published research, that they'll use it as a resource. Just like I do when I buy a book, I can refer back to it. We highlight it, we bend the pages, and we go back and we reread it from time to time, and that's kind of really been the foundation. And then of course the meal prep company is it's a service, and if people like the concept of the diet, a higher protein, easy to digest, low FODMAP meals, then they can if their budget allows, then they can use that service.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly shift to the business aspect. And Ayush is always talking about you. So in terms of the more business aspect, the thing that you do really well is slogans, based on what Ayush said. And now then, whenever I see somebody drinking a protein shake, I always smile and remember something that Ayush said, that you always say, shakes are for fakes, eat steak. So then Ayush personally started buying protein powder, and he just eats bison instead. That's one of the things that we make fun of him, because we don't understand why. It just sounds like a completely random animal. So these slogans, they obviously generate hype around the product, which we talked about earlier. But could you go more in depth on how exactly you came up with these slogans and how you think they've helped with your businesses?
Yeah, back to shakes are for fakes, eat steaks. A lot of folks would come to me and ask me, Stan, what's the best protein powder? And it would be frustrating because there's no magic to any of that. It's food in a can. And it's inferior to whole food because it lacks the micronutrients. Doesn't have the same satiety benefit, doesn't have the iron, the B12, the zinc, the creatine, the creatinine. None of that's in there. So it's not that shakes can't be convenient. I always say that they're convenient and they taste good. But, and with respect to bison, just any ruminant animal, beef, bison, deer, any ruminant animal that has a 4-chambered stomach that can ferment cellulose is a higher nutrient density, more easy to digest protein source. So, but you're right. People remember bumper stickers, as you're aware. And so, shakes are for fakes, eat steaks. It at least creates a dialogue. Whether you agree with it or not, at least, it creates a dialogue. But I've trademarked a few of them. Compliance is the science. That's one that I came up with some years ago in terms of what's the most important thing you can do. The best diet's the one you'll follow. I've also said that the best work or the best exercise is the one you'll do, and the best diet's the one you'll follow. And that got me to compliance is the science. If people, any program that they could stick to for an extended period of time would provide them the results that they desired. Just that most people don't consistently do anything for any extended period of time. I also trademarked the Monster Mash, which was one of the meals that I used. But I said in a video one time that in the war on obesity, the enemy is also the victim. You're at war with yourself. To talk about, that there's really nobody to blame out here, and people need help. But at the end of the day, it's the individual's going to ultimately be the individual's responsibility. Some other quotes that I've said on a number of podcasts: that if you're waking up at 4 a.m. to do fasted cardio after 4 hours of sleep, you're stepping over $100 bills to pick up nickels. And that's just talking about the importance, again, of sleep and how it affects your metabolism. I've said sometimes things are truthful but not useful. Things like move more, eat less. Move more, eat less is factual. It's truthful. It's undeniable. Unfortunately, it's not very helpful. So I say it's truthful, not useful. And you have to give people, tools to eat less. We could talk about those. Another one, when people start eating healthy food, like the vertical diet, which is intended to be, easier on digestion, and then they go back and they grab a fast food double cheeseburger or something like that, and then they tell me that their guts were wrecked as a result. My response is, you stray, you pay. And once your body gets used to
fried now, whenever I eat anything fried now, it completely messes up my stomach.
Yeah, you stray, you pay. And so I laugh about it. Sometimes people initially, they get all mad. They're like, I used to be able to jam down a Carl's Jr. bacon double cheeseburger, no problem. Once you start feeling good, you start recognizing better when you feel bad. A lot of people just don't know what it feels like to feel good because they haven't eaten and exercised and slept consistently well for an extended period of time. You guys have heard me say I don't eat foods I like. I eat foods that like me, and I make that decision about an hour after I eat. It's along the same lines of you stray, you pay. I'm pretty picky about the foods I eat because I know how they're going to feel on me after I eat them. And then with training, I always say the hard shit works better than the easy shit. Anybody can go down and set up a light lat pull down, but jump on the chin up bar. It's just harder. Let's start with the hard shit. Start with the squats, not the leg extension. And things that are done to you or for you are rarely as effective as things you do for yourself. And that has to do more with rehab and injury prevention and the like. So those are just some quotes that I think the industries that have popularized in the industry that have some benefit for folks. They're easy to remember.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly go back to something you mentioned about fitness before we go back to the business aspect, which Nitin will talk more about. And you had like these two quotes. It was simple, sensible, and sustainable, and compliance is the science. Yeah. And you recently posted on Instagram, and it was a picture of you at 18 where you were like in your soccer wrestling phase. You were like small. Yeah. Then 42 when you were in your like competition phase. And then 54 where you are currently. And then it was like, there's no such thing as a 30-day transformation. It has to be a lifestyle. And I feel like high schoolers, they'll go and they'll be like, oh, I want to change my body. And they'll go work out for like a couple of days. They'll see no changes. And then they'll get discouraged and they'll go back to McDonald's eating their Big Mac. So if you could just quickly talk about the importance of sticking to something and like what high schoolers can do to like stay motivated so that they don't go back to like eating that unhealthy food.
Yeah, motivation's a hard one, brother. I tell you, if I had the answer to that, I mean, and that's why I say the best diet's the one you'll follow and the best exercise is the one you'll do. If you're doing something that you don't enjoy, a lot of people are looking at the finish line, and there is no finish line. This is kind of the point of this conversation. It's not a means to an end. Like in the pursuit of happiness, that's not a destination. That's a journey, and the journey has to be rewarding. Simple, sensible, and sustainable. It has to be something that you can. That's part of your lifestyle. Going to the gym needs to be enjoyable. You're gonna have to find out. It has to fit within your schedule. It has to be one of your priorities. They say you could be great at anything, but you can't be great at everything. So you're really going to have to decide, is going to the gym going to be one of the few things that you're going to excel at, or having the physique that you want to have. And if you want to add more muscle, it's going to take a significant investment of time and energy. So you have to decide how important is that, and is it more important than something else that you desire to do? There's a lot of things I'd like to do. I'd love to be able to play the piano, and but at one point I wanted to get back into martial arts, but I realized I had so many other things on my table, and then you got as you get older, you have kids and a wife and obligations. It's like, there's only so much you can do. So it needs to be, and I also think we overestimate how much we need to do in terms of bodybuilding. Just 3 days a week for 40 minutes is sufficient to get about 95% of the progress that you're ever going to get, irrespective of how much time you invest. And I just think that people assume that you have to do more than you do. And there's a genetic predisposition. Some people are more inclined to gain muscle at a faster rate than others. And so there's a whole lot of factors that are involved with that. But at the end of the day, you don't build muscle in the gym. I have an article that I wrote about this some 10 or more years ago. I kind of talked about the 99% rule, and that's that eat, sleep, and train. All you do in the gym is break down muscle tissue. So if you don't have a consistent sleeping schedule and you aren't eating sufficient calories and enough protein, you're not going to get the benefit of the work that you did. It's just a stimulus, and you actually break down muscle tissue, and then you don't build that muscle without adequate sleep, calories, and protein. So that becomes as important or more important than the exercise itself, or else you're getting a no return on investment. It's a waste of your time to go lift weights and not eat enough food and rest enough to recover from the lifting session.
Specifically what you said there about like people thinking, oh, 3 days a week is not enough. You have like these teenagers, they have nothing else on their plate. So they're going to the gym like 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. They're training they're doing like 10 exercises per muscle group. They're getting it like from every single angle, every single isolation exercise. They machine hop. Like it's pretty bad. And that's just not necessary. You can really slim down your exercise portfolio. You can slim down the time you're spending in the gym, focus on other stuff. And then if you focus on eat versus if you're focusing too much on training, actually. So
no, you're 100% right. And that's a mistake that I've talked about that I made when I first started out. I was training 2 hours a day, 6 days a week, doing every exercise in Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. And I was eating the food that the guy behind the counter at Gold's Gym was eating to prep for a bodybuilding show, which means he was dieting. And he was eating tuna out of a can and rice cakes. And so I just assumed, hey, this is the way you do it. You build muscle by lifting weights, and you eat like a bird. And I hardly gained anything. I told you I was about 140 when I started, and 2 years later I was 158. That's not a lot of weight to gain, and you're in 2 years of training with the amount of time and energy I invested into it. And then I finally met a gym owner who was also a competitor and a judge, and he flipped the script on me. He told me to train every other day and to start eating adequate calories, and I immediately started gaining weight, significant weight. Yeah. And so I have in the ebook, I put evidence-based guidelines for hypertrophy that goes through all the science of sets, time, and reps, and load, and frequency, and volume, intensity, rest periods. I go down step by step and tell people exactly how they should train to, the minimum effective volume, the maximal recoverable volume. All of it's in there so that people get the right stimulus. And then, of course, I talk about the demands of calories and protein and how to get those in.
So one thing that I quickly wanted to touch on was I'm a huge Shark Tank geek. So as soon as Ayush told me that like you were on Shark Tank, I immediately went to HBO and watched your episode. So one of the things that I saw that I commonly see is we see people get deals on Shark Tank, but we never see what happens afterwards, how exactly the sharks follow up with the people that they invest in. So I remember that Damon John invested $50,000 for 33 1/3% of your company. So how exactly does to what extent do they actually help you with the rest of like growing your business? Because now that they have like a third of a stake in it, they have like a huge part of helping out with it. So if you could just talk more about your experience on Shark Tank, first of all, and then how exactly Damon helped you grow your business, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll tell you this for those people who are interested, because it'll be a longer, more detailed explanation. I did a video called Shark Tank Behind the Scenes, one of my Rhinos rants. And I talked through the whole process from the first application to visiting them to do they had a live audition here in Las Vegas. You got 1 minute to pitch your product, and then you and thousands of other people walked out of there not knowing anything, waiting for the phone call, ultimately talking to a producer, having to visit them again to do a second pitch, and then submitting just oodles of information, tax returns and financials and profit and loss paperwork. And this took multiple months, going over a potential, for not even knowing if you're going to appear. They tell you that right up front. They said, look, there's no guarantee that you're going to appear on the show. Even after you get to LA and you pitch to the producers, before you ever pitch to the Sharks, there's no guarantee you'll pitch to the Sharks. Half of those people get cut. And then the next day, if they do put you through and you pitch to the sharks, you're also told that just because you get a deal, it doesn't mean you're going to go on TV. Only about 80% of those deals go on TV. And you're right. Even though you pitch a deal to a shark and you strike a deal on TV, the real negotiations begin after that point. Then you have to get on a conference call and you have to talk with the shark. And, I partnered with Damon John, and you got to sell them again because they have some say into which deals they made get aired on TV. Not 100%, but obviously if they invest in a company, one of the major sources of marketing is that airing on television. It goes to 10 million homes. And that's the biggest chunk of marketing that you could possibly hope for. I mean, imagine the cost of that. So, you have to renegotiate and sell that deal to the shark even after doing that live on the show. And then subsequent to that, like in Damon's case, he has a team of people that works on just trying to get your products into their connection, their stores, their retail locations, or what have you, and marketing. And so I worked with them on that kind of thing. And of course, I already had a marketing plan, and I already had good exposure and social media exposure. But it's interesting. I have to say this about Shark Tank and just about any home run like that. A lot of folks will put a ton of energy into these home runs, and very few people, I think there were 40,000 people that applied, and somewhere around 120 ended up on TV. And so that's a rare, that was a rare opportunity. I've tried to get on other shows without success, The Apprentice, but it's really what you do every day. It's the singles, it's accumulating the singles, not the home runs. And sometimes when you're swinging so hard, looking for these big deals, you end up losing sight of the fact that accumulating a lot of singles and doing consistent marketing is really your bread and butter.
Okay, so you said that there's like an intensive pre-recording process that you have to go through where you're submitting like your profit and loss statements. And that's very, very important for like an investor who's looking into it, because one of the things that Ayush and I do, we do like a stock market game essentially in our school where we have to like analyze the same profit and loss statements, and we know what we're going to invest before like the actual, I would say, the competition goes on. So in the same way, do the sharks know what they're going to invest in, or if they're going to invest in before the cameras turn on? Is it truly like an actual negotiation cycle? Because one thing that I saw on TikTok was there's this group of there's the same group of people who are like trying to sell coolers for like the beach and like trying to keep beers very cool. And they say that it's almost like an hour-long discussion between the sharks going back and forth where you're trying to figure out an offer with them, and the Shark Tank cuts out and puts maybe 6 minutes of it. So how intense is the actual negotiation, and how does the entire investing process work? Because you obviously mentioned that after the sharks make the deal, it's not set in stone yet. It's just like a handshake and a hug pretty much that you see on TV. And I've seen like online that many deals don't go through after the actual taping is over, just because like either the business owner just doesn't like the deal and they just wanted to look good on TV, or just something happens. So could you talk a little bit about the whole investing process and how exactly it works specifically for Shark Tank, and if the sharks know before the recording if they're going to invest or not?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I talk about that in that rant, Shark Tank behind the scenes. The sharks don't see any of this information that the producers are getting. They're just really kind of doing their due diligence to make sure that you're a legitimate business and there's no conflicts of interest, criminal history, or anything like that. Just want to make sure. So the sharks only know your name and maybe the name of your company. They have no information other than that. And you hit the nail right on the head. When you walk out there, when you watch the video, there's like 5 or 6 minutes worth of questions, or maybe not even that much. That's a 40-minute process when you're live standing there with the bright lights under you, under the hot heat, with sweat going down your brow. And the sharks are drilling you with questions, and they're asking each other questions, and they're coming at you hard. I kind of figured about midway through that they were playing both sides. Each shark would say something that expressed some interest in my product, and each shark would say something negative about my product or service. And I started to realize about halfway through that provides the editors, video to, depending on the direction that this thing goes. That's at least that was what my interpretation was. Is that, but nonetheless, it was a lot of questions, very detailed questions about your marketing, about your history of sales, about your product, manufacturing, everything that you can imagine. And it's long and it's stressful. The one thing that they say to you before you walk down the carpet to stand in front of the sharks, right before the doors open, they say, don't lock your knees. That was the last bit of advice, because you stand out there long enough, they've had people just fall right over. It can be pretty stressful, and the lights are hot and those people are coming at you, one question after another. And sometimes somebody will ask a question, you can't even answer it in time, and somebody else is jumping in, and it just turns into kind of a big free-for-all, as you know from watching the show. I watched the show many, many times for probably 5 years, and watched the episodes and took notes prior to my appearing. And I had a pretty good idea about what everybody did, what kind of businesses they purchased, what kind of questions they would ask. And I'd already prepared my answers. I had my family sit in the living room with pictures. I printed out large pictures of the sharks' faces and had them hold the picture in front of their face. And so I could, and I was and I had a light shining on me, and I was standing in front of them in the living room, and they were all sitting there just like the sharks do. And I did my presentation probably 50 times and had them ask me a whole host of different questions that I responded to. So I was well prepared. I think that from watching the video, you saw the presentation was pretty polished, and that's just because I practiced, I rehearsed it a lot. And I kind of learned that from the bodybuilding world, and even in powerlifting, is I would go to the location that I was going to compete at, and I would get on stage a day before, and I would practice and have video of me. When I competed in powerlifting, I would find out exactly what equipment they were using, whether it was a monolift, what kind of bar, what kind of plates, and I would train with those to make sure that nothing happened that I wasn't prepared for when I got there. That was the same with Shark Tank. I felt prepared. I tell a little story in the video that's worth listening to. Who's the producer, Burnett, of Shark Tank? Mark Burnett. The day, is that correct? It's been many years. I think it is.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been many years. But when I was, the day before you present to the Sharks, you present to all the producers, all the staff. And this was on a Monday morning, and I guess Sunday they had won 2 Emmys for Shark Tank the year that I presented. And I wasn't aware of that. I didn't follow kind of Hollywood behind the scenes. I just was a Shark Tank fan. And so Monday morning, I go out there to present, and I had to drag all my own stuff down, that 800-pound tire and that 200-pound dumbbell and all those weights for deadlifting. I had to hook a trailer up to my car or to my Hummer and haul it down there, and I had to load it all in myself. And then I had to roll it out onto it was a big concrete floor. It wasn't the actual stage. It was in a different venue. It was just a giant warehouse, on the Hollywood set. And so we set it all up, and I was getting ready to do the presentation as I had practiced so many times before. And this guy, I'm going to say this guy, stands up, and he's got jeans and a t-shirt on, and he walks over and he says, we're going to have to move the tire over here. We're going to have to move the weights over there. And I'm like, no, hold on, wait. And I pulled my phone out, and I had pictures on my phone of the camera angles that I had watched prior episodes. And I said, and I pointed, I said, there's going to be a camera right there, and it's going to see this tire come up, and then it's going to go boom, and I'm going to be standing right there in front of the camera. And the guy looks at me for a second, and he goes, okay. And he turns around and walks and sits down. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was Mark Burnett. And I was telling the producer of the show how to lay out everything according to where the cameras were going to be. He probably thought it was somewhat arrogant. I didn't know who he was, but I had already planned for all that. I had accounted for it. And so it was kind of an interesting side note to everything that happened going up to that point.
Yeah, so mentioning the tire and the dumbbell and everything like that, most of the Shark Tank pitches, they're really, really boring. There's a couple of them they have the physical product with them, but some of them are really, really boring. But one thing that you did was, it was super engaging. How you were how you lifted the tire and flipped it over, and then the sharks were like, oh, why doesn't one of Damon or somebody do that. So I felt like it was a very interactive episode with the sharks itself. So did your investment actually go through in the end with Damon, and where exactly did the investment go? And to what extent did the actual investment help your business?
Yeah, it did. Damon agreed to a deal with me, and I didn't need money, but we agreed to a share for him. I had already, I'd already sold, over 100,000 coolers by that time, and I had product, and I didn't have any debt, and I was already, doing pretty well. So their biggest help was, I think, Damon's connections with manufacturers overseas allowed me to make the next evolution of the cooler, which was that Cooler Sports. It was the smaller, more, I think, just kind of a better aesthetic looking product. And that was the one that ultimately was more successful. And I was able to use his manufacturing connections to get that done in an expedited fashion. One of the hardest things about making products overseas is quality control and pricing, and just length of time it takes with the language barrier and everything else, particularly when you're engineering a particular product. And there's lots of, different types of plastics and concerns for, melting or cracking, or it's endless. You have to anticipate that any of these investments that you make will take longer and cost more than you ever thought possible, and be able to weather those storms. And fortunately, we were able to do that. Most of my business was from expos, traveling around and doing a lot of shows, appearing at the Arnold Classic and the Europas and the Mr. Olympias. And I would sell tens of thousands of dollars worth of product at those shows. So when COVID hit and all those shows shut down, it had a significant impact. And then with the trade war with China, when Donald Trump engaged in that with them, my cost of goods skyrocketed, tariffs skyrocketed, and so it became more and more difficult to maintain a profit. Selling products like that, as you guys can imagine, is very expensive up front. You have to buy the product in advance. You obviously pay for the tooling, which is well over 100,000. Purchase a significant quantity of product in order to get the price point that you want. Multiple containers, 40-foot containers containing, tens of thousands of coolers. Ship them over here, store them. Then you have to sell them to distributors who sell them to retailers who sell them to customers. And you could just start to chip away at the profit margins piece by piece. So those kinds of businesses are small margins. You have to be very comfortable with the fact that you're not going to get rich quick off of something like that. But it's nonetheless, it's still, if you can get the prices right and sell enough of it, then you can still make a good return.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of this podcast, where we've talked about everything like your past experiences, your fitness journey, and the entrepreneurial aspect of you, where you've owned and started many companies. And one of the staples of our podcast at the end is where we ask the person we have brought on like a tips question. And that is basically where you can give any advice to the high schoolers listening. It can be about anything from mental health, fitness, bodybuilding to business. So if you could just answer our tips question and just give any advice to the high schoolers listening, that'd be great.
Yeah, boy, I think we covered a lot of important stuff just in terms of lifestyle, but I'll tell you, there's probably, I'll give you my top 3 or 4 progress killers. I think a lot of people have dreams, and a dream without an actual plan is, or I say a goal without a plan is just a dream. I think the number one killer of people's goals is procrastination. People just don't, they tend to put off till tomorrow what they can do today. The next one's indecision. I said you could be great at anything, but you can't be great at everything. And so you're going to have to ultimately decide what you're going to pursue. You can't serve 2 masters or chase 2 rabbits, as they say. So procrastination, indecision. Another one's fear of rejection. And we see a lot of that. People are just so afraid, particularly with social media out there and all the, you just can't avoid negative feedback. It's just impossible. And so you just gotta go out and do it. Put yourself out there. What do they say is you're just better off. You're just a lot better off trying and failing than failing to try, is really where that comes down. And the last one is what I call 3-minute enthusiasm. People get motivated. And in today's quick social media world, you can get motivated all day long, every day, and never do anything. And I worry about that. These bumper stickers, everybody's got, they're posting memes on their Instagram, with whatever motivational meme for the day. But are you actually, accomplishing anything? Are you procrastinating? Are you indecisive? Do you have fear of rejection? And are you just talking about, being motivated? I say it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And, until you actually get in there and start doing the work, I'm just concerned that people live off of this 3-minute motivation, that they're just trying to get excited to do something, but never actually doing anything. So in my mind, those are probably some of the biggest progress killers right there. And if you could write those down and just master them, don't procrastinate, make a decision, don't give a shit about what anybody else thinks about your goals, and stop looking around for other people to give you validation and motivation. It's your goal. Go for it and start actually making progress. I think one of the biggest mistakes people made, and I made this mistake whenever I was writing my book, it's a big undertaking to write a book, is that I was looking at the totality of the project. This was going to be over 200 pages with 500 resources. Nobody wants to sit down and start a project that's that big. You got to go 0 to 1. And so I just had to sit down. I had to assign myself 1 hour a morning. I woke up early before the kids, and I just said, I'm going to spend 1 hour just slowly moving forward with this book. I'm going to start with an outline, and then I'm going to start writing one chapter at a time. And as soon as I got away from looking at the totality of the project and started actually making a plan, a step-by-step plan, then it started coming together, and I was able to release the book. And I ended up releasing it. It was the #1 new release bestseller on Amazon for the 4 weeks that it was in the category for diet books. And so we've been, hugely grateful for its success.
Yeah, thank you so much for all your time, Stan. And I like what you said about just focusing on what you need to do today instead of looking at, the long-term goal, because that can often become super overwhelming. For example, I think there's that famous quote, if you're trying to build a wall, just focus on laying one brick as perfectly as you can today, rather than focusing on looking at the entire wall. But overall, I think this was an excellent podcast. I think a lot of people in the fitness industry, due to the rise of social media influencers they post one workout on Instagram a week, they get famous, they make millions of dollars. But I think the thing with you is you have such an in-depth understanding of, business, fitness, everything, that it was really engaging talking to you for all of us, because, Rishi and I both focused on the business and fitness aspects, and Nitin's obviously super into business. So we really appreciate you taking your time to do this for us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
That's our show for today. Now roll the credits. High School Not So Much a Musical is hosted by Ayush Agarwal, Nitin Jaladanki, and Rishi Sinha. Narration by Samhit Padala. Music from Louis Luang Relaxation Cafe, Tune Pocket, and Infraction. If you like the show, please recommend it to your friends and family. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.